In the quiet hush of a Sunday morning, voices rise in unison from wooden pews, filling the sanctuary with songs born of hope and hardship. Gospel music, with its soaring melodies and fervent praise, is more than sound. It is the heart of African American church life, pulsing through generations. Its origins are tangled with the sorrows of slavery and the strength of faith, where spirituals whispered in the fields became hymns of resistance and solace. Over time, these songs grew roots in church communities, drawing from scripture and daily struggle, forging a new musical language of devotion. The landscape is one of resilience and creativity, shaped by migration, urban life, and the longing for freedom. Here, gospel music emerges not only as a soundtrack to worship, but as a living testimony, a story carried forward in every refrain, echoing the enduring spirit of a people and their faith. In the humid hush of southern nights, voices rose from the fields and shadows, weaving melodies that carried more than mere words. These were the first stirrings of gospel music, forged in the crucible of faith and struggle within African American churches and communities. To understand gospel's power and resonance, one must journey back to its earliest roots, the spirituals born in slavery, echoing through praise houses and brush arbor meetings where hope and sorrow mingled in song. In the late 18th century, as the inhuman institution of slavery tightened its grip across the American South, enslaved Africans found themselves cut off from their homelands, languages, and families. Yet their capacity for faith and creative expression remained unbroken. In the absence of formal sanctuaries, small gatherings known as praise houses became sacred spaces where enslaved people could worship, sing, and seek solace. Outdoor brush arbor meetings offered another refuge, a place to gather beneath makeshift shelters of branches to share burdens and belief in deliverance. Here, music was not an ornament but a necessity, a way to endure, to remember, and to resist. Central to these gatherings was the spiritual, a religious folk song that emerged as both a balm and a battle cry. Spirituals were shaped by the realities of bondage, yet they reached beyond those confines, drawing from a blend of African musical traditions and the imposed Christianity of white colonists. The rhythms of African music, percussive hand claps, stamping feet, and the powerful call and response were woven into melodies adapted from European psalms and hymns. Improvisation was not just encouraged but essential, allowing singers to shape songs to the moment, to the need, to the spirit moving within the group. Many of these spirituals found their genesis in the ring shout, a circular dance accompanied by singing, chanting, and ecstatic movement. The ring shout was more than a performance. It was a ritual, a communal act of resilience. Participants moved counterclockwise, clapping and shuffling in time, creating a rhythm that pulsed with both grief and joy. White observers sometimes dismissed these gatherings as wild or even idolatrous, unable or unwilling to see the spiritual depth and cultural continuity they represented. For the enslaved, however, these rituals were lifelines, connecting them to their ancestry and to one another. The content of spirituals was deeply theological, yet always grounded in lived experience. Biblical narratives of bondage and liberation. Moses leading his people out of Egypt, Daniel in the lion's den, the Israelites crossing the Jordan River became metaphors for the enslaved community's own longing for freedom. Songs such as Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and Wade in the Water did more than recount sacred stories. They spoke in code, offering hope and sometimes hiding instructions for escape. The lyrics could signal safe routes or warn of danger, transforming music into a mode of communication as well as a source of strength. Frederick Douglass, who had himself escaped slavery, later described the spirituals as testimony against slavery and prayers for deliverance. He heard in them both the joy of spirit and the deep sadness of their plight, a testament to the complexity of these songs. For the enslaved, spirituals expressed a full range of emotion: sorrow for suffering endured, faith in a better world, and the hope that, one day, liberation would come. The process of creating and singing spirituals was communal. Call and response, a hallmark of African music, became a defining feature. A leader would call a line, and the group would respond, building a powerful sense of unity. The act of lining out, a practice with roots in Scottish church traditions, also shaped the format of these spirituals within Black churches. When few could read or had access to hymnals, a leader would sing or chant a line, and the congregation would repeat it, ensuring that everyone could participate regardless of literacy or formal training. This method, adapted and transformed by African Americans, gave rise to a unique musical tradition rooted in both faith and struggle. Within this tradition, improvisation was paramount. Singers might alter melodies or lyrics to reflect the present moment, giving voice to new hopes or fresh sorrows. The music was alive, evolving in real time, and always responsive to the needs of the community. Percussive elements, hand clapping, foot stomping, even the rhythm of work itself became instruments in their own right, driving the songs forward and marking the passage of time. These musical practices were not only a means of artistic expression, but also of survival, providing comfort and forging solidarity in the face of constant threat. The influence of spirituals extended beyond the religious sphere, shaping nearly all subsequent forms of American music. Work songs and field calls, themselves shaped by African traditions, merged with spirituals to create a sound that would later give rise to the blues and, eventually, gospel. The themes of hope, deliverance, and resilience remained central, even as the musical forms evolved. The spirituals, often authored by unknown composers, became a universal language for the enslaved, a way to voice the otherwise unspoken dreams of freedom and justice. With the Great Awakening and the subsequent revival movement sweeping through the South, many enslaved and free black people were drawn into the expanding circles of Christian worship. Yet, even as Christianity was enforced by slaveholders, African Americans transformed and reinterpreted its teachings, creating a style of worship and song that was distinctly their own. The rituals of the church, singing, dancing, bodily movement, were often suppressed by European clergy, but the spirit of these traditions endured. African Americans adapted Protestant hymns, blending them with their own rhythms and melodies, infusing worship with a sense of urgency and dependence that reflected their daily realities. After emancipation, as formerly enslaved people established their own churches and schools, the tradition of the spiritual continued to flourish. New institutions like the historically black colleges and universities became centers for the development of concert spirituals, arranged versions of the old folk songs that could be performed by choirs. Yet, the heart of the tradition remained in the spontaneous communal singing that had sustained people through generations of hardship. Out of this rich soil, gospel music began to grow. In the early 20th century, African American churches became the birthplace of a new sound, one that retained the call and response, improvisation, and deep faith of the spirituals, but was shaped by changing times and new influences. Gospel music provided a spiritual space apart from the white European world, allowing African Americans to express their faith, resilience, and cultural identity in ways that were uniquely their own. The Black Gospel Church, with its vibrant music and passionate worship, came to define a Black aesthetic in the arts, echoing through literature, visual art, and beyond. Gospel music, at its core, is the good news sung into the darkness, a message of hope and redemption that rises from struggle. Its origins are inseparable from the history of slavery and the ongoing fight for dignity and freedom. Every note, every lyric carries the weight of generations who found in music a way to survive, resist, and believe in something greater than their circumstances. The enduring legacy of spirituals and early gospel music is preserved today in archives and restoration projects, safeguarding early sheet music and recordings for future generations. These documents offer a window into the past, illuminating the social and religious context that shaped the music and, by extension, the people who created it. Yet, even without written records, the spirit of the song survives, in church pews, in family gatherings, in the rhythms of daily life. What is perhaps most remarkable about the roots of gospel music is the way it transforms suffering into beauty and hope. The songs did not erase the pain of slavery or the harsh realities faced by African Americans, but they offered a means of transcendence, a way to affirm dignity in the midst of dehumanization. Gospel music became a vehicle for spiritual liberation and resistance, carrying profound theological and historical significance. It was and remains a testimony to faith's power to endure and to inspire. As gospel music continued to evolve, it retained the urgency and fervor of its beginnings. The sense of dependence on God, on community, on the shared struggle remains central. Even as styles and contexts changed, the music always reflected the lived experiences of African Americans, giving voice to hope, survival, and the unyielding belief that a better day was coming. In tracing the origins of gospel music within African American churches, one finds a story not only of musical innovation, but of resilience and faith in the face of profound adversity. The spirituals that once rang out from the fields and hidden gatherings have echoed across centuries, shaping a tradition that continues to move hearts and uplift spirits. This music, born of both faith and struggle, laid the foundation for a unique and powerful musical heritage, one that remains a vital part of American life and culture to this day. As the 20th century dawned, the sound of worship in African American churches was already alive with the legacy of spirituals, yet something new was stirring, something more urgent, more syncopated, and unmistakably modern. The roots of gospel music, already deep in faith and forged in struggle, began to twist and reach upward, searching for new expression. Unlike the spirituals sung in fields and hush arbors, this emerging gospel sound was shaped by a changing world. Urbanization, technological innovation, and the vast movement of Black communities from south to north all played a role, creating a crucible for transformation. The Great Migration, those decades when millions of African Americans left the rural South for the cities of the North, changed more than the landscape of American cities. It transformed the very soundscape of Black worship. The old ways of singing, with their call and response and improvisational flair, traveled northward and found new homes in storefront churches and burgeoning congregations. These transplanted Southerners brought with them the musical traditions of their youth, but the city demanded something different. Urban life, with its noise and pace, seemed to call for worship music that was more immediate, more electrifying. In the North, especially in Chicago, the gospel sound began to take shape, not as a simple continuation of what had come before, but as a bold reimagining. Charles Albert Tindley, a pastor and composer in Philadelphia, played a pivotal role in this early transformation. Born in the shadow of slavery, Tindley merged the familiar melodies of spirituals with the structured forms of hymns, creating songs that would become gospel standards. He was among the first to gospelize traditional tunes, infusing them with the rhythms and harmonies of Black folk music. Tindley's songs, such as "Stand By Me and We'll Understand It Better By and By," resonated with congregations, bridging the worlds of Southern spirituals and the new urban gospel sound. His work set the stage for what was to come. But it was in Chicago, amid the swirl of migration and cultural collision, that gospel music would find its most influential architect. Enter Thomas A. Dorsey, a man whose life story reads almost like a parable about the birth of gospel music. Born in Georgia and raised on the sounds of Black church music, Dorsey found success as a blues pianist and songwriter as a young man. In those years, he saw little distinction between the music of the juke joint and the music of the sanctuary, except for the words, the rhythms, the improvisation, the deep well of emotion. They were all present. Yet when a personal tragedy turned his full attention to sacred music, he would become known as the father of gospel music. Dorsey's contribution to gospel was nothing short of revolutionary. He brought the blues into church, not just as a musical style, but as an emotional language. His songs pulsed with the rhythms of blues and ragtime, yet pointed heavenward. In the early 1930s, as Dorsey began composing songs like "Take My Hand, Precious Lord," he faced fierce resistance from church leaders who saw these new sounds as dangerously close to the secular world. Ministers worried that the syncopation and feeling of the blues would corrupt the sanctity of worship. But Dorsey persisted, convinced that this music could speak to the joys and sorrows of everyday life like nothing else. In Chicago, Dorsey found a community of singers and musicians hungry for this new gospel sound. He sold sheet music to choirs and pastors, promoted concerts, and in 1932 co-founded the National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Choruses. This organization trained musicians and singers, spreading the gospel sound far beyond Chicago's city limits. Dorsey's approach to music was participatory and improvisational. He encouraged congregants to join in, to make each song their own, and to pour their hearts into the music. This was not the reserved worship of old, but something vibrant and alive, a sound that welcomed personal testimony, communal joy, and even sorrow. Through his work, Dorsey restructured not only the music itself, but also the way it was published and performed. He established the first independent Black gospel publishing house, ensuring that gospel music could reach churches and choirs nationwide. Yet Dorsey was far from alone. The spread of gospel music owed much to the powerful voices who championed it on stage and in sanctuaries. Mahalia Jackson, a protege of Dorsey, carried the new gospel sound to national prominence with her rich, soaring vocals. Through performances and recordings, Jackson and her contemporaries made gospel music a force not only in Black churches but also in American culture at large. Chicago became the epicenter of this movement, thanks to the city's thriving publishing houses and the steady influx of Southern migrants. The impact of the Great Migration on gospel music cannot be overstated. As families settled in cities like Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia, the tension between established Black churches, often modeled on white congregational styles, and the new arrivals who preferred a more emotional, improvisational worship grew sharper. In these conflicts, gospel music became both a battleground and a bridge. The newer, more exuberant gospel sound, rooted in the experiences of slavery, Jim Crow, and Southern revivalism, challenged traditional notions of church music. Over time, the infectious rhythms and passionate delivery of gospel won the hearts of congregations, especially among young people who craved a worship experience that spoke to their lives. By the 1940s and 1950s, gospel music had entered its golden age, thanks in large part to technological innovation. The phonograph, radio, and later television brought gospel music into homes far beyond the church walls. Recordings of gospel choirs and soloists reached new audiences, and gospel musicians began to perform in concert halls and secular venues. This exposure helped gospel music break free from its strictly church-based origins, allowing it to influence and be influenced by other genres. The lines between sacred and secular continued to blur, as gospel borrowed from and contributed to blues, jazz, and eventually soul, rock, and hip-hop. Artists such as Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke, and Marvin Gaye would later carry gospel's vocal intensity and improvisational style into popular music, forever changing the sound of American culture. This evolution was not without controversy. As gospel music became more popular and incorporated contemporary sounds from jazz chords to electric instruments, churches sometimes found themselves in the midst of worship wars, debates over tradition versus innovation. Some congregants feared that technology and modernity would strip gospel of its communal, live essence, while others embraced the accessibility that recordings and electronic instruments provided. Still, technological advances made it possible for gospel to reach a broader audience, ensuring its survival and growth in a rapidly changing world. Throughout this period, gospel music proved its resilience and adaptability. It became a cornerstone of Black community life, a means of recruiting young people to the church, and a powerful thread connecting generations. Gospel's influence extended far beyond the sanctuary, shaping identity and inspiring unity, especially during times of social upheaval. In the civil rights era, gospel hymns and chants were adapted from marches and activism, providing courage, hope, and a sense of collective resolve. Songs rooted in gospel and spirituals became anthems of resistance, echoing in the voices of protesters and sustaining them in the face of adversity. As the decades passed, gospel continued to evolve. By the late 20th century, artists like Edwin Hawkins brought gospel to new heights of popularity with songs like "Oh, Happy Day," which blended gospel's message with rhythms and instrumentation from contemporary secular genres. The industry side of gospel music grew, with broader recognition and airplay outside traditional church settings. This expansion allowed gospel to influence and be influenced by a dazzling array of musical styles, from jazz and rock to rhythm and blues and hip-hop. Gospel's improvisation, vocal expression, and emotional power left an indelible mark on each, while always maintaining its core message of hope and redemption. Today, gospel music remains a living, breathing force. Its journey from the sacred hush of spirituals to the electrifying sounds of modern gospel is a testament to the creativity, resilience, and faith of African American communities. The sound of gospel is ever-changing, shaped by migration, technological progress, and the ceaseless quest for freedom and dignity. At its heart, gospel music is still about community, about sharing joy and sorrow, hope and struggle in song. Its evolution mirrors the journey of a people, from bondage to self-determination, from rural fields to bustling cities, and from the margins to the center of American musical life. The gospel sound that echoes in churches today carries forward all that came before: the legacy of spirituals, the innovations of Tinley and Dorsey, the passion of Mahalia Jackson, and the countless voices who have shaped and been shaped by this music. In every note, there is a story of migration, adaptation, and unyielding faith. Gospel remains, above all, a dynamic force, one that continues to inspire, unite, and transform, just as it has for over a century. Gospel music, rooted in the lived experiences and spiritual longing of African American communities, has always been more than just a sound. It is a cultural and spiritual force, an ever-evolving language of faith, resilience, and collective memory. In the Black church, gospel's melodies and messages have shaped not only worship but also the very fabric of community life, serving as a wellspring of identity, belonging, and action. Within African American churches, the power of gospel music lies in its ability to bring people together, forging bonds that extend beyond the sanctuary walls. The experience of singing or listening to gospel is inherently communal. Each note and lyric becomes a shared affirmation of hope and struggle, a living testimony to the endurance of a people who have weathered centuries of adversity. In this context, gospel music is not merely an accompaniment to prayer or preaching, it is itself an act of worship, a vessel for joy, lament, and praise. Over time, this participatory spirit has made gospel a central pillar of church life, sustaining generations as they build, nurture, and defend their communities. The cultural significance of gospel music is especially profound among Black emerging adults. Spirituality, research shows, remains a deep cultural strength in these communities. Even as some young people move away from traditional religious affiliation, many continue to identify as spiritual, a shift that does not diminish gospel's importance but instead reshapes it as a tool for personal and collective identity. For these young adults, gospel music provides spiritual grounding, a sense of continuity with the past, and a framework for navigating contemporary challenges. The music becomes a bridge between generations, connecting the wisdom of elders with the aspirations of youth, all within a shared language of faith and resilience. Gospel's influence extends well beyond church pews, shaping the broader contours of Black cultural identity. It is found in the harmonies of a neighborhood choir, the rhythms echoing through family reunions, and the spontaneous outbursts of song at community gatherings. The music's reach is so wide that it has become a marker of belonging, a sound that signals home, kinship, and shared experience. In this way, gospel helps to affirm and celebrate Blackness, offering a counter-narrative to societal marginalization and erasure. Yet gospel music's impact goes beyond affirming identity. It has also been a force for community building, a tool for organizing, mutual aid, and activism. Throughout history, African American churches have functioned as more than places of worship. They have served as centers of education, political engagement, and social support. Gospel music, with its messages of hope and liberation, has provided the soundtrack for these efforts. Whether sung at fundraising rallies, in the midst of grief, or during moments of collective triumph, gospel has galvanized communities to action and sustained them through adversity. The unifying power of gospel music is perhaps most evident in its cross-cultural appeal. While born in the crucible of Black American experience, gospel's resonance has long transcended racial and cultural boundaries. Listeners from diverse backgrounds are drawn to its emotional intensity, its celebration of the human spirit, and its calls for justice and mercy. In a society often fractured by difference, gospel music can serve as a bridge, fostering dialogue and understanding. Its harmonies invite all to participate, to feel, and to hope together. Scholars and musicians alike have noted that gospel's capacity to bridge divides is not accidental but intrinsic to its message, rooted in a belief in the sacred worth of every person and the possibility of redemption for all. The influence of gospel is also visible in its ongoing evolution. As the cultural landscape has shifted, so too has the sound of gospel music. A new wave of Christian and gospel artists continues to emerge, reflecting the changing tastes and experiences of contemporary audiences. These musicians draw on a range of influences: hip-hop, rhythm and blues, pop, while retaining the core spiritual themes that have always defined gospel. This evolution is not a departure from tradition but a testament to gospel's adaptability and relevance. It demonstrates how gospel music remains attuned to the needs and hopes of each generation, able to speak to new contexts while honoring its roots. Urban gospel, in particular, reveals the diversity and reach of the genre. While certain styles and artists may appeal to specific audiences, youth in metropolitan areas, for example, their influence often extends far beyond their immediate contexts. Urban gospel blends the traditional with the contemporary, using the pulse of the city as a backdrop for timeless messages. The result is a sound that feels both familiar and fresh, anchoring listeners in communal memory while inviting them to envision new possibilities. In this way, gospel culture continues to reflect and shape the evolving identities of Black Americans. The enduring legacy of gospel music is perhaps most powerfully felt in its role as a force for social change. Time and again, gospel's call for justice has animated movements for freedom and equality. Its messages have inspired activists, comforted the grieving, and emboldened the fearful. In moments of crisis, gospel songs have provided a vocabulary for protest and a reservoir of hope. As the struggle for justice continues, gospel music remains a vital tool for organizing and resistance. Its lyrics call forth the best in humanity: compassion, solidarity, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of transformation. The reach of gospel music is also evident in its influence on other musical genres. From soul to rock, from jazz to contemporary Christian music, gospel's fingerprints are everywhere. Its expressive vocal techniques, emphasis on improvisation, and deep emotional core have shaped the soundscape of American music. Yet even as gospel's influence spreads, the genre retains its distinctiveness, its grounding in Black churches, its orientation toward the sacred, its insistence on hope in the face of hardship. This balance between tradition and innovation, between the particular and the universal, is part of what gives gospel music its enduring power. For many African Americans, gospel remains a touchstone in times of both joy and sorrow. Its songs are sung at weddings and funerals, at baptisms and homecomings, at marches and vigils. The music provides language for grief, celebration, longing, and gratitude. It helps to make sense of a world that is often unjust and unpredictable, offering reassurance that suffering is not the end of the story. In worship and in daily life, gospel music is a companion, a guide, a source of strength. Today, as new challenges arise and the cultural context continues to shift, gospel music remains as vital as ever. Its message endures, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, but always present, reminding listeners of their dignity, their history, and their collective power. For young people especially, gospel offers a space to explore and affirm their spirituality, even as their relationship to organized religion changes. The music adapts, but its purpose remains the same: to inspire, to unite, to heal. If gospel music has taught anything, it is that hope is not naive, it is an act of resistance. To sing in the face of suffering is to claim one's humanity, to insist on the possibility of a better future. In African American churches, this lesson is lived out each week as voices rise in harmony, weaving together individual stories into a tapestry of community. The genius of gospel lies in its ability to carry burdens, to lift spirits, and to point toward redemption, not only for individuals, but for whole communities. As the story of gospel music continues to unfold, one thing remains clear. Its legacy is not just musical, but deeply cultural and spiritual. Gospel has helped to define what it means to be Black in America. Not in spite of hardship, but through it. It has given voice to the voiceless, hope to the weary, and power to the marginalized. In doing so, gospel music has left an indelible mark on American life, shaping not only the sound of worship, but also the rhythms of justice, identity, and belonging. To this day, the strains of gospel can be heard wherever people gather to seek solace, to celebrate, or to demand change. Its influence radiates outward, touching lives across boundaries of race, class, and creed. As new generations take up the mantle, gospel music continues to evolve, drawing on the wellspring of Black spirituality and community. Its message of faith, hope, and love remains as urgent and transformative as ever, a testament to the power of music to heal, to unite, and to endure.